Oh, spicy title. How spicy is this video gonna be? Not at all. If you clicked on this video thinking I was gonna have a hot gamer TM take on games with real life controversies and how I obtain my life force by slurping up the tears of whatever political extreme is mad at any given moment, I have bad news for you, and that news is that I am a flaming bitch. I'm not here to talk about divisive games that find themselves under scrutiny for the actions of their creators or the poor working conditions of their staff, because that sounds like a very serious topic that will be handled by somebody who doesn't have a walnut brain and the courage of a chihuahua. When I say divisive games, I'm talking about games that no one can agree on whether the actual project is good or bad. And yeah, some of these very games have also been linked to some less than savory news cycles and dramatic backlash from either side of the political spectrum, but I want to clarify that that's not what I'm focusing on here. Alright, I'm glad that's been covered. Anyways, let's talk about Atomic Heart. Atomic Heart released the other day and it received mixed reviews, and the important thing to note is that mixed reviews can mean one of two things. Usually what it means is this, a nice little bell curve. You'll obviously have some outliers, but most people have individually mixed feelings about it. The game has some good elements and some bad elements, but crucially, everyone largely agrees on its level of quality, with that quality being hella mid. But the mixed reviews that I find interesting are the ones that look like this or this. Now those are some mixed reviews. Not all 75s on Metacritic are born equal. For the most part, if you play them, you'll get an experience that is a 75 out of 100. Your most likely conclusion will be, that was fine, just fine. But for other 75s, your friend might say, oh my god, this is an underrated gem, you gotta try this out. I have no idea how its score is so low, and you'll say, oh man, I guess I gotta try this out then. And then 10 hours in, you quadruple crossover, step back, alley-oop, slam dunk that shit straight into the garbage where it belongs. It's a 50-50 toss-up. But no matter which end I'm on for any individual game, whether I'll fight valiantly at its side or help beat it to a pulp, I love that they exist because it means these developers are trying something. Let me put it in terms of the only thing I like more than video games: candy. Yeah, remember how I said I couldn't handle nuanced topics? This is what I mean. That's a sentence you'd expect out of a 4th grader, not a grown-ass man with a university degree. Starburst. We've all had Starburst, right? The thing about Starburst is that, mathematically, there can only be 24 possible quality rankings of the original 4 flavors, and yet if you ask 24 different people to rank them, you'd get 25 different answers. I have made videos on a few hot topics before. I've dipped my toe into the flaming pits of chronically online communities, but I can say right now that the unironic 100% factual, definitive ranking of the Starburst flavors is cherry, lemon, strawberry, orange, and it'll make more people angry than anything I've said before combined. That said, no matter what your personal rankings are, your favorite Starburst is made better when it's surrounded by the stuff you don't like. Here's the reason I made this a Starburst metaphor in the first place, because I think you'll understand when I say this. If I gave you a bag full of your favorite Starburst flavor and a regular assorted bag of Starbursts, your favorite flavor will taste better in the assorted bag than the one flavor bag. It just will, and I know you guys all feel that. A red Starburst from a bag of red Starburst tastes like a red Starburst. A red Starburst from a bag of assorted Starburst tastes like crack. If they came out with a bag like this, I'd buy it for a little bit, but then I'd always go back to good old assorted, even though orange Starburst are basically radioactive to me, because when this bag hits, it hits different. That's why these mixed bag games are so important and so fun. The games that could be a red or an orange Starburst, and not only do you not know, but if you gave it to somebody else, they might have a completely different reaction than you. There's an excitement when something does click because it wasn't a certainty, it feels more personally rewarding. And jumping off from that, it also becomes grounds for interesting discussions and a deeper understanding of what matters to us in entertainment. I haven't actually played Atomic Heart yet, but I'm curious whether I'll side with people who found it a directionless mess or a fresh, inventive take on the FPS genre. Is cohesion and a strong sense of identity an absolute must-have for me, and without it this game flops? Or can those things be outweighed by distinct imagery and a power fantasy? Where are my limits? What other games will I enjoy even if they didn't receive critical acclaim? As a creative, what ideas would I like to pursue myself in my own work? No matter what happens, I am one step closer to answering those questions with a game like this. If I told you, man, I love Spider-Man PS4, you'd probably say, Yeah, so does basically everyone. It's nice to agree on stuff, but it doesn't spark an interesting discussion or tell you much about me other than the fact that I'm a fan of a good game about the most popular superhero ever conceived. But if I told you that one of my favorite indie games is Fury, a game with a 77 critic score on Metacritic and a 7.8 audience score, now we can have a discussion. You can start to see what I really enjoy, what I value in games, what doesn't bother me as much as other people. Maybe you try it out and you don't like it, and we'll talk about the exact same elements of the game with polar opposite opinions. There's a unique energy to games like this that I really love. My favorite is when people take risks with stories. Dude, I'll take a ballsy story over a boring story 11 times out of 11, even if it makes me as mad as Far Cry 5's. I have a bit of a quota for these videos where every 10 I make, I need to make fun of Far Cry 5 at least once for having a largely generic narrative and gameplay loop, but as much as I hate the ending that sparked New Dawn, at least they went for it, you know? It's one of the dumbest endings ever, but it's also the only thing I remember about this entire story. If it wasn't for this, I'd start wondering if I even played Far Cry 5 in the first place. It was that mediocre. And damn it if it didn't at least impact me more than the story for something like Shadow of War. I got absolutely nada, zilch out of this whole narrative. I might as well have deleted the hours I spent watching these cutscenes straight out of my life, and it wouldn't have changed anything. More like Shadow of a better game. Got him, you piece of shit. We're at a point now where games basically have to do one thing to be praised for their story, and that's not be embarrassing. If you're not embarrassing, then you can have the most basic narrative with the most artificial emotions and baseline world building, and some people will still act like you created the most beautiful narrative ever told. Metroidvania has taught me that. I'll confess something to you guys right here actually. I've said that a lot of games had decent stories in some of my videos, even though I literally couldn't tell you a single event that happened in them, because I thought if I said that, it'd be blasphemous. But you know what? I'm not that guy anymore. You want to hear a good game story? I'll tell you a good game story. There was a kingdom, bad things happened, now it's in ruins. You're here to defeat the corrupt ruler and restore balance. The end. Give me my award for best narrative, Jeffrey. I like more inventive stories. Do something weird, make choices not everyone's gonna like, create something special for a group of people, even if another group might not click with it at all. Robert Eggers makes some of the most critically acclaimed films of every year he releases, only for large portions of the audience to dislike them or not watch them, but the ones that do can't stop gushing about him. Now that's what I'm talking about. That's a very, very tough thing to ask for AAA devs, because I don't know if you guys noticed this, but they like money, and alienating an audience, not really good for making money. Which is why I've always had respect for, and brace yourselves here, because this is maybe the only thing more controversial than that Starburst opinion, The Last of Us 2, because this game had a slam dunk of a potential story ready to go, and instead they try to do something completely different. It may have caused a goddamn civil war, but at least it wasn't generic. You know what The Last of Us 2's story could have been? For some reason, Joel and Ellie have to go on another adventure. It could be literally any stupid reason. Tommy's gone missing. We have to find Ellie's long-lost sister. There's only one Krispy Kreme left standing, and it's all the way in Seattle, and Joel's a certified glazed glizzy gobbler, so he wants to go get some. Any reason to get them out of Jackson. And while they're gone, Ellie slowly realizes that Joel lied to her in the last game. They have a falling out. Ellie says something hurtful like, "I'll do this one last thing for you, Joel. We'll grab these finger-licking good donuts for the road, and then you and I are done." And then Joel says something tough like, "Finger-licking good was KFC's motto, kiddo. You sure as hell ate my daughter." And you cry. They continue on their journey, fall into a trap. Joel fights off 312 clickers at once in a 3-hour action scene and dies heroically after pushing Ellie out of the way of a nuclear blast. Ellie realizes that the real Krispy Kreme was the surrogate fathers we made along the way, and cue the sad guitar music. Everyone would have loved this. Look how sad. Oh my god, he was such a good dad and died heroically. And you know how I know everyone would have loved it? Because this is basically what everyone was pitching. Maybe not the Krispy Kreme part, but everything else. Everyone and their grandma had the bold prediction that Ellie would slowly find out what happened and Joel would die in the end, and they could have made a whole narrative around that and sold a bajillion copies, and Neil Druckmann would be crowned president of the world, but how much would I really care about that going forward? I don't think there's a version of The Last of Us 2 that could have been made that would have the impact that the actual version of The Last of Us 2 we got made on me personally. It's just so different to what I expected, and it stands out for its challenges to establish video game story rules. That's not to say it's inherently better than games that use established rules, it's just different, and I really like when I can find something different. The actual best game narrative that I've ever experienced is probably Red Dead 2, which doesn't challenge too much, but it perfects a lot. Spoilers for Red Dead 2's ending, skip here if you want to avoid them. realistically, as great as this game is, it's called Red Dead Redemption, and the guy gets redemptioned at the end. And as for Arthur's death, it's beautiful and tragic and an incredible conclusion, but that's also the easiest way to get your audience to feel something, kill off major characters. Like, this video isn't a tragedy, but do you want me to turn it into one right now? And before he could finish the video, Assad had a heart attack and died. The end. Did you see how sad that was? Point is, killing off major characters isn't something revolutionary. It's like how to make an audience cry 101. Now, unlike what it would be with lesser writers, Red Dead earns this death. It absolutely does. But this isn't exactly something we haven't seen before, it's just something that we rarely see done this well. There is a magic to that, but there's also a magic to The Last of Us 2 if you were a fan of it. It is far messier and far more experimental in structure, and it loses a lot of people in that process. Some didn't like the premise, some didn't like how specific events played out, some people hate the pacing and the structure, and some people hate gays. But if you don't fall off by the time the credits roll, it's likely one of, if not the most impactful narratives told in this medium. Again, I actually liked Red Dead 2's better, but I've never been this rocked by a story. I've never remembered this many details so vividly after only playing the game once. In fact, I've played games and watched shows 5 or 10 times over and know way less about their sequence of events than The Last of Us 2's. And yeah, I hated and still hate how discussion around this game goes, because from both sides it seems pretty toxic. And I think a counterpoint to this whole thing is that taking an IP that people universally loved and creating something intentionally, self-admittedly divisive seems kind of mean. You're driving away part of your audience and ruining something that people were excited for. But as messy as the situation around it was and how much anxiety and frustration topics around The Last of Us 2 gave me, it also completely reformatted how I thought of agency in games. This game came out a month before Ghost of Tsushima, a much more agreeable story-driven third-person game that a lot of people love, and I love it too. I really only know one person who doesn't like this game, and that's my roommate, but to be fair, this is how he spends his free time, so you can make your own judgment call, I guess. And I remember a lot of people who really didn't like The Last of Us 2 saying that Ghost's story blew The Last of Us out of the water. This is how you make a real story-driven game. Now, I liked the story. It was a good time, and I remember thinking it had a lot of cool moments. It was a story where they followed all the rules and didn't make any major mistakes. But I'll be honest with you, I remember like 3 things about this game's narrative. Spoilers again, skip here to avoid them. I remember the opening, I remember the time where you get the ghost dance for the first time, and I remember the final showdown. Also, you get betrayed by your homeboy at the end of one of the acts, but I forget how that goes down. That's it. That's all I got. It was a good, entertaining story for the time it lasted. There's nothing wrong with that, but that is all it was. The Last of Us 2 certainly wasn't for everybody, but for the people it was for, it was a genuine game changer, and that's pretty sweet. At the end of the day, I'll like or even love a lot of agreeable games, the ones that basically everyone is on the same page with. Of course I will. Why wouldn't I? They're agreeable for a reason. But there's something weirdly alluring about games that people can't agree on, games that will cater slightly to more niche things that you enjoy, like an itch finally being scratched. From Software's games aren't really divisive critically, but they do spark a lot of heated discussion from audiences, especially around difficulty. On one hand, I get why some people want difficulty options because the rest of the game around it might appeal to them, but they don't enjoy or physically can't play something this demanding. On the other hand, my personal journey with my first FromSoft game, Sekiro, started with me being so frustrated with it that in any normal scenario I would have turned the difficulty down just to save me the annoyance, and it ended as maybe the most rewarding gameplay experience of my life and an introduction to my new favorite genre of games, and I personally see From's handling of difficulty to be largely responsible for that payoff. This topic will never end because I genuinely think neither side is wrong to think the way they do, it's just good old-fashioned personal preference. But in committing to something so entirely, something that not everyone will agree on, From Software was able to cultivate a fan base out of people who do enjoy what they're committing to and have become one of the industry's most celebrated studios as a result. So yeah, maybe I'll play Atomic Heart and think it's the corniest, messiest piece of media I've ever experienced and make a 90-minute video about the importance of cohesion. Or maybe I'll love how experimental it is and make a 94-minute video about how it's a subversive masterpiece. Really, the only certainty is that I'll stretch an incredibly basic topic into something much larger than it needs to be, because guess what, nerds? I'm doing that right now. But to be completely honest, I'm almost more excited that a game like this is splitting opinions this harshly because we need more games like that. If I reach into this pack of Starburst and pick out a red, it's gonna feel pretty damn satisfying. Oh, callback! Did you see that narrative symmetry? God, I freaking nailed that.